Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our Databricks training and exploration series. I'm Jacob Garrison with Technology Partners, and let's learn about Databricks notebooks. To start, let's talk about the ways that you can create a new notebook in Databricks. There are essentially two ways for you to do this. The fast and easy way is through the New tab. Now, if you're in the data science and engineering environment or the machine learning environment, you can go to the taskbar on the left-hand side and click New. Then click Notebook, and it'll bring you to the Create Notebook dialog box. The other way that you can create a notebook is through the Workspace tab. This is for when you have a folder system and you want the notebook to live in a specific folder, either one that's a shared folder or one that's nested under your user. So if you go back to the taskbar and click Workspace, then navigate to where you want the notebook to live, which will typically be under your user. You can then right-click, then go to Create and select Notebook, and it'll bring you to the same Create Notebook dialog box as before. Now you can also do this in the SQL environment, which has a slightly different version of Workspace, but instead of right-clicking, you go to the Add button in the top right corner and select Notebook. Now from this dialog box, you can give your notebook a name, select the default language you want the notebook to use, and which cluster you want to attach to it. Then click Create. Now that the notebook has been created, I want to go over how to change those settings we just set up. If you want to change the title, just double-click the title and update it accordingly. Beside the title, you can go to this drop-down menu, and that will change your default language. Then over here on the right, you can go to this drop-down menu to change the cluster you're attached to. Now in this drop-down menu, you can see at the top which cluster you were attached to last, or the cluster that you selected in that initial dialog box if it's a new notebook. If you hover over this cluster, it gives you a quick menu. Most notably, you can start, stop, and restart your cluster, as well as a shortcut to go directly to your cluster configurations. And I'll show you why you may want to do that in just a little bit. Moving down, you can see other clusters that you have access to and have used before. If you select one of these clusters, you'll attach right to it, and it will automatically start the cluster if it's currently off. If you're not seeing a cluster that you think you should, you can go to More, then select the cluster on the left, and this is a drop-down menu that you can scroll through to look at the clusters that you have access to. From here, you select the cluster you want and click Attach. If you happen to not see a cluster that fits your needs and want to create a new one, you can click Create New Resource down at the bottom left. From here, you get a dialog box that shows your basic cluster configuration options, as well as a link to do more advanced configurations, which will redirect you to a new compute page found in the Compute tab. For more info on clusters and their configurations, you can check out our Compute and SQL Warehouses training video. Now let's go ahead and get out of this, and I just want to show you that you can access that same dialog box by going back to the cluster drop-down menu at the top and selecting Create New Resource at the very bottom. Moving on, you can make your notebook collaborative by clicking this Share button, which brings you to the Permissions dialog box for your notebook. From here, you can select a user, group, or service principal that you want to allow to access your notebook, along with a checkbox to email users a notification that you shared your notebook with them. The different levels of access are Read, where they can only view and comment on your notebook; Run, which allows them to attach a cluster to your notebook and run it; Edit, where they can actually change your notebook code; and Manage, which allows them to manage your permissions and share the notebook. When you add these permissions, just be sure to actually click Add and then Save. Once you've finished your notebook, there is the Schedule button that allows you to run your notebook on a regular cadence. This will create a job or workflow that can then be accessed in the Workflows tab over here on the left. If you want more info on workflows, you can check out that video in our training series. Now that we've looked at the notebook as a whole, I want to walk you through some code. As you can see at the top, our default language is SQL. So that means any unmarked cell will be assumed to be SQL. For each cell, you can also confirm by looking at the right-hand side, and you can see that in this case, SQL is selected. From here, you can simply write your code as you normally would. In my case, I'm going to do just a quick query of a table that I have for our demo group and run that cell. Here you can see it displays the result as a table that you can scroll through. Similarly, you can do this in other languages such as Python by utilizing Spark SQL. So in a new cell, I'm going to redefine the language to Python. I'll do this by clicking the SQL button and then selecting Python. As you can see, it entered %Python for me at the top of the cell, which will now allow me to run Python as I normally would. Alternatively, you can just type %Python and it'll update that button accordingly. So now that I'm working in Python, I'm going to copy this query and paste it into a Spark SQL statement. When I run that, you can see it recognizes this as a data frame now. So to work with this, you'll want to set this as a variable and then display the variable. You can also use this variable as a typical pandas data frame where you could, for example, perform functions on your table record by record in a for loop. You can also change your cell to another language after the fact, and it will keep your code as is. It won't make you start from scratch. So if I change this to Scala, make some tweaks to the code, and try to run it, you can see I get back an error message. That's because I'm attached to a shared cluster that is made for my entire demo group by default that we all share. This is where it can be helpful to have a single user cluster because that will allow additional languages, specifically Scala and R, to run. So if I try to run this cell again, now that I'm attached to my own personal cluster, you can see it successfully runs. A few more things I want to point out as I wrap up. If you go up to File, you do have the option to export your notebook, as well as import an existing notebook. And you can do this from either a file or a URL. Next, Edit gives you your typical options like copy and paste, but you can also move a cell up or down relative to other cells. View allows you to customize your actual notebook view, such as adding line numbers. Under Run, you can find a collection of commands such as running your current cell or all cells, but you can also clear your state and or cell outputs, which can be very helpful when you're doing final testing of your code. The last thing I want to discuss is libraries and packages. You're able to import a package as you normally would in a notebook. For example, in a Python cell, I can start with import pandas and proceed on with my code as normal. However, while some packages and libraries come with Databricks, some do not. So if you have a library that you need that doesn't come with Databricks, you'll need to install it yourself. The easiest way is to start your notebook with pip install and enter the library and version of choice. The other option takes more time and has a major limitation, but it does allow some self-exploration if you want to shop and don't know exactly what you're wanting. This other way is to install the library directly to your cluster. So let's hop on over to Compute and look at my clusters. So let's start by going to my shared demo cluster. As you can see at the top, the Libraries tab is grayed out. This is the major limitation of this method. You can't do it with shared clusters. So in these cases, you'll have to stick with the pip install method. On the flip side, if we go back to clusters and open my cluster, you can now access this Libraries tab. Here you can see I have a few already installed. If I wanted to add a new one, I can just click on Install New, and you can see the variety of source options that I can choose from. For me, it's typically either a Python package that I'll want to install, such as Beautiful Soup, or I can choose from Maven by either entering the coordinates of the package, or I can hit Search Packages and search Spark Packages or Maven Central. You can also select the releases of a specific package through this portal. Once you find the right version, just hit Select, then Install. If you happen to install the wrong package, just click the checkbox next to it, then select Uninstall. You'll have to restart your cluster to get it fully uninstalled, which you can do by going to More, then clicking Restart. If you're interested in learning more about what's available in Databricks, you can check out our other videos where we walk through the features and capabilities of each environment. Thank you.